Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Furiosa, a Mad Max saga in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. West Films friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Furiosa. A Mad Max Saga. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-pre-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. Start the video. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga is a 2024 post-apocalyptic action film directed and produced by George Miller, who wrote the screenplay with Nico Lathouris. It is the fifth installment in the Mad Max franchise, and the first not focused on Max Rockatansky, instead a spin-off prequel to Mad Max Fury Road 2015 and an origin story for Furiosa. Starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Alila Brown as said character and years before Fury Road, the film follows her life for over a decade, from her kidnapping by the forces of warlord Dementis, Chris Hemsworth, to her ascension to the rank of Imperator. Tom Burke also stars as Praetorian Jack, a military commander who befriends Furiosa. Several Fury Road cast members return in supporting roles, including John Howard, Nathan Jones, and Angus Sampson reprising their characters. The film begins in what can be seen as a green paradise of a solar punk future, and quickly moves to the more traditional diesel punk, which this franchise is known for. Miller initially intended to shoot Furiosa back-to-back with Fury Road, but the former spent several years in development hell amidst salary disputes with Warner Bros. Pictures, Fury Road's distributor. Several crew members from Fury Road returned for Furiosa, including Lathouris, producer Doug Mitchell, composer Tom Holkenborg, costume designer Jenny Beavan, and editor Margaret Sixel, Miller's wife. Filming took place in Australia from June to October 2022. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, premiered at the 77th Cannes Film Festival on the 15th of May 2024. It was released theatrically in Australia on the 23rd of May 2024 and in the United States the following day. The film received highly positive reviews from critics and multiple award nominations. It was named one of the top 10 films of 2024 by the National Board of Review, but was a box office bomb, grossing $174.3 million against its budget of $168 million. Plot: decades after the apocalypse, Australia is a radioactive wasteland, and the green place of many mothers is one of the last remaining areas with fresh water and agriculture. Rubilis uncover the green place, while two children, Furiosa and Valkyrie, are picking peaches. Furiosa tries to sabotage their motorcycles, but the raiders capture the barefoot girl as a prize for Dementis of the biker horde. Furiosa's mother, Mary Jabrasa, pursues them to the horde's camp to rescue Furiosa, but Dementis tracks them down. Mary stays behind to buy Furiosa time to escape and gives her a peach pit to remember her by, but Furiosa refuses to leave Mary behind. Dementis forces Furiosa to watch her mother's crucifixion. Haunted by his own family's death, Dementis adopts Furiosa as his daughter, hoping she will lead him to the green place. Sometime after, Dementis besieges the Citadel, another settlement with fresh water and agriculture. However, the horde is repelled by the War Boys, the fanatical army of Citadel warlord Immortan Joe. Dementis uses a Trojan horse strategy to capture Gastown, an oil refinery that supplies the Citadel with gasoline. At peace negotiations, Joe recognizes Dementis' authority over Gastown and increases its supplies of food and water in exchange for the Horde's physician and Furiosa, who has tattooed a star chart to the green place on her left arm to find her way home. Afterwards, Joe imprisons Furiosa with his stable of wives inside a vault. After Joe's son, Rictus, shows an attraction towards her, Furiosa devises a plan to escape. One night, Rictus breaks Furiosa out of Joe's vault to rape her, but she slips from his grasp using a wig made from her own hair and disappears. Disguised as a mute war boy, Furiosa works her way up the ranks of Joe's men for over a decade. She helps build the War Rig, a heavily armed supply tanker that can withstand raider attacks in the lawless wasteland. Furiosa plans to escape by hiding on the rig when Joe sends his top driver, Praetorian Jack, on a supply run. Disillusioned by Dementis' callousness, his lieutenant, the Octoboss, goes rogue and launches an air assault on the rig. His mortifiers slaughter the rig's entire crew and destroy Furiosa's hidden motorcycle, but Furiosa and Jack team up to defeat them. Furiosa tries to carjack the rig and drive home, but Jack easily thwarts her. However, he recognizes her potential and offers to train her to escape if she helps him rebuild his crew. Furiosa becomes Jack's second-in-command and is promoted to Praetorian. She and Jack develop a bond and resolve to escape together. They see an opportunity when Joe decides to attack Gastown, which Dementis has mismanaged to near ruin. Joe orders Furiosa and Jack to collect weapons and ammunition from the Bullet Farm, an allied mining facility. However, Dementis, having already taken possession of the farm, ambushes them when they arrive. Furiosa and Jack barely escape, and Furiosa's left arm is injured and pinned to an overturned car. Dementis chases them down and has Jack dragged to death. Furiosa escapes her chains by severing her own injured arm, sacrificing her star map to escape. A lone man A watches from afar as Furiosa struggles back to the Citadel, where she and Joe's aide, the People Eater, form a strategy to avoid a trap planned by Dementis. Instead, Dementis is lured into a trap at the Citadel, and the War Boys crush the Horde. Having lost her path home, Furiosa shaves her head, builds a mechanical prosthetic in place of her severed arm, and pursues the fleeing Dementis. After an extended chase, Furiosa subdues Dementis in the desert. She imprisons Dementis in the Citadel and uses his still-living body as fertilizer to grow a peach tree from her mother's pit. Joe promotes Furiosa to Imperator and gives her command of a new war rig. She meets Joe's 5 breeder wives in the vault where Joe once held her prisoner and shows them a peach from the tree. The night before another supply run, the 5 wives hide in Furiosa's rig. Production. Pre-production director George Miller and co-writer Nico Lathouris spent over 15 years writing the script for Mad Max Fury Road 2015 and developed backstories for every character, particularly co-protagonist Imperator Furiosa. Miller and Lathouris eventually wrote a Furiosa-centered screenplay, which actress Charlize Theron used as a reference for her performance in Fury Road. According to Miller, Furiosa probably takes place after Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, 1985, but the Mad Max franchise has no strict chronology. The first trailer of the film, released on 30th November 2023, stated that Furiosa takes place 45 years after the collapse. In July 2010, Miller announced plans to shoot Fury Road back-to-back with a live-action prequel film entitled Mad Max Furiosa, but during pre-production, it was decided to shoot only Fury Road. At one point, Miller and Lathouris hoped to turn the Furiosa screenplay into an anime film directed by Mahiro Maeda, who had previously worked on The Animatrix, 2003, Neon Genesis Evangelion, 1995-96, and Porco Rosso, 1992. In May 2015, Miller stated that if Fury Road became successful, he would develop 2 more films. In November 2017, Miller's production company filed a lawsuit against Warner Bros. Over a Fury Road salary dispute, which delayed the production of any additional entries in the franchise. In July 2019, Miller revealed that a Furiosa film was still being planned in addition to 2 Mad Max sequels. By March 2020, Miller and Warner Bros. Settled their lawsuit and began casting the Furiosa prequel, which Miller intended to make after 3,000 Years of Longing, 2022. It was reported that the film would take place over a time frame of 15 years, depicting Furiosa's backstory of how she was displaced from her home and spent her life trying to get back. Multiple Fury Road crew members agreed to return for the film, including composer Tom Holkenborg, costume designer Jenny Beavan, editor Margaret Sixel, makeup designer Leslie Vanderwalt, production designer Colin Gibson, no relation to original Mad Max star Mel Gibson, and sound mixer Ben Osmo. Beavan, Sixel, Vanderwalt, Gibson, and Osmo had all previously won Academy Awards for their work on Fury Road. In 2020, Miller said that the semi-retired John Seale had agreed to return as cinematographer, but Seale retired after shooting Miller's 3,000 Years of Longing, explaining that he wanted to spend more time with his grandchildren. Simon Duggan took over as Furiosa's cinematographer. George was definitely looking to find an Australian cinematographer, Duggan recalled. PJ Vayton told him, "Look, it's a no-brainer. Just get Simon to come in and do it." And George trusted him. George knew the work I was doing and thought it was amazing. So when we first met, we just wanted to talk about the Australian industry, the people we knew, and the experiences we had. And we knew that Fury Road was the starting point to the look and feel of what Furiosa was going to be. But only a starting point. Village Roadshow Pictures, which had co-financed Fury Road, was credited in initial marketing material for Furiosa, with its involvement also acknowledged by an official press kit related to the film and a press release by the Cannes Film Festival. However, following its premiere, all mentions of the company were omitted from promotions and the film itself. In May 2024, a box office report by Deadline Hollywood stated that Warner Bros. Is all in on Furiosa and financed the bulk of the film's budget without co-financiers such as Village Roadshow, most likely the result of a content dispute related to Warner Bros.' simultaneous release strategy followed in 2021. The online news site also reported that Domain Entertainment, a private equity fund that co-financed other Warner Bros. Productions like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom and Wonka in 2023, was listed in the opening credits after the Warner Bros. Logo. Casting Miller sought to cast a younger actress for the role in lieu of using de-aging technology for Theron, explaining that the technology still leaves an uncanny valley effect. Theron admitted that the decision was a little heartbreaking, for sure, but understood Miller's rationale. In March 2020, during the COVID-19 lockdown in Australia, Miller auditioned several actresses over Skype for the Furiosa role. In October 2020, Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Hemsworth, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II were cast, although Abdul-Mateen later dropped out due to a scheduling conflict. Miller chose Taylor-Joy after seeing her performance in an early cut of the film Last Night in Soho, 2021, and auditioning her with the mad-as-hell monologue, quoted by the character Howard Beale, portrayed by Peter Finch, from Sidney Lumet's Network, 1976. Edgar Wright, the director of Last Night in Soho, told Miller to do yourself a favor and grab the opportunity to work with her. Miller felt that there's a kind of timelessness to her, there's a mystery to her, and yet she's accessible. Taylor-Joy received advice from Nicholas Hoult, who had previously portrayed Nux in Fury Road and worked alongside her in The Menu 2022. According to Goran D. Clute, who portrayed the Octoboss, Miller asks every actor who auditions with him to try out the mad-as-hell monologue. Hemsworth, an Australian, had grown up watching the Mad Max films. In 2010, he had previously applied for the title role in Fury Road that eventually went to Tom Hardy. Hemsworth later explained that he was not a big enough star at the time to earn the role. His most notable role, Thor, had not yet debuted in the 2011 film of the same name. To accurately portray resource scarcity in the wasteland, Hemsworth cut his calorie intake in half compared to when he prepares for a Marvel Cinematic Universe (MCU) film. Describing and elaborating on his character's motivations, Hemsworth said, "He's a pretty horrible individual. Through the whole film, we kept coming back to, this is evil, but what is the intention behind it? It's not just sadistic insanity. There is a real purpose. The wheels are turning. He's plotting and planning and 10 steps ahead of everyone else." Amid the character's harshness, Hemsworth imagines Dementis as something of a father figure to Furiosa, adding, "I think that's how he sees himself. I think there's a paternal quality in nature to the relationship in his eyes. Furiosa would, I'm sure, argue to her death the complete opposite." In 2021, Miller cast Alila Brown as a young Furiosa. She had previously worked with Miller on 3,000 Years of Longing. Miller said that she reminded him of a young Furiosa and that she impressed him while doing the splits on set. Tom Burke joined the cast in the autumn of 2021 as Praetorian Jack, replacing Abdul Mateen. Burke said that while most of his scenes were shot sitting down in a truck, he had to spend long hours in the gym becoming as lithe as possible, given that he might have to safely jump off the war rig many times in a row until Miller got a take he was satisfied with. When principal photography commenced in June 2022, the producers disclosed that Nathan Jones and Angus Sampson were set to reprise their roles from Fury Road. They additionally announced that Quaden Bales, who worked on 3,000 Years of Longing after a video about his mistreatment at school went viral, would appear in a minor role. During the production, Miller agreed to cast Lachi Halm, who was already playing the role of Rizdale Pell, as a younger Immortan Joe, succeeding Fury Road's late Hugh Keys-Byrne, who died in 2020. Miller initially wanted to use a body double for Joe and record his lines in post-production with ADR, but Holm convinced Miller that he could replicate Keys-Byrne's voice and eyes. When you are working on a Dr. George Miller movie, there's no pressure on you because you're in an incredibly supportive environment, Holm said. During pre-production, Holm fell off a motorcycle while practicing for a scene as Rizdale Pell. Afterwards, Miller decided all the actors' bike riding would be performed by his stunt double, Chris Matheson. Filming took place in Australia from May to October 2022. Principal photography began on the 1st of June 2022. Miller shot the film at various locations in New South Wales, Broken Hill, Silverton, Hay, the stowaway action sequence, Kurnell, the bullet farm and the final confrontation between Furiosa and Dementis, Terry Hills, the Green Place, Melrose Park, Gastown, and the Disney lot in Sydney, the Citadel. The action sequence where the raiders ambushed the war rig took 78 days to shoot, where close to 200 stunt performers worked on it every day. The sequence became known during production as Stowaway to Nowhere. Miller stated that Furiosa was an easier shoot than Fury Road, alluding to the latter's troubled production, and complimented Warner Bros.' new leadership for implementing an approach to filmmaking much more collaborative than it was adversarial. Burke said that Miller wanted a different kind of filming style from Fury Road, which used short takes and long cuts. He noted that Miller specifically wanted to shoot the scene where Dementis taunts Jack and Furiosa in one take. In lighting most of Furiosa's exterior shots, Duggan and gaffer Sean Conway recognized that nearly all of our story would be told during daytime, so everything relied on sunlight, Duggan said. And because we were in mid-El Nino, the weather during the shoot was unpredictable, with pouring rains and winds up to 50 miles per hour. So we added a lot of artificial light to create sunlight, which helped us create a harsh look that was quite different than what you'd expect. To augment their location's natural light, the filmmakers relied on a uniform approach, employing an array of 6 18K HMI PARs at varying degrees of spot. The 6 PARs were mounted to 3 heavy-duty telescopic handlers that were easily movable and could withstand the conditions, and the lamps were protected from the rain, Duggan noted. We found that the 18K array could cover almost half a football field and accommodated the size of most of our exterior location sets. We could put the light wherever we wanted to. Whenever the sun was coming in and out, we'd follow and match that direction. He continued. George told us we weren't going to wait for anything to light our sets, so we had to be prepared with one solution, and that meant we didn't have to stop shooting. We could just keep on going. Of course, we always oriented the sets, or our camera, to make use of sidelight or backlight from the actual sun, but the brute power of those PARs gave us all the light we needed. Hemsworth arrived on set nursing a back injury, but said that he was excited to work on Furiosa because playing Dementis allowed him to get out of that typecast space of the muscly action guy and play a character with complications and darkness. He explained that suffering without a purpose is awful, but suffering with purpose can be rejuvenating and replenishing. Burke said that Miller was willing to collaborate with his actors to structure Furiosa and Jack's relationship, explaining that while Miller wanted a romance, Burke felt the characters should push romance to the side until they believe they are riding off to a safer place. While promoting the film, the actors disclosed several ideas that Miller considered or even shot, but ultimately cut. Taylor-Joy said that Miller shot but ultimately deleted a scene where Furiosa cuts off Dementis' tongue, an act which is mentioned but not shown in the theatrical version. Burke said that Miller vetoed the idea of a training montage where Jack teaches Furiosa about road war because it was too much of a cliché. Post-production Fury Road's VFX supervisor Andrew Jackson returned for Furiosa. His home studio gig worked with Framestore, Metaphysic.ai, Rising Sun Pictures, and Slate VFX. He had received an Academy Award nomination for Fury Road and subsequently won the Oscar for Tenet 2020. Jackson said that Furiosa leans much more heavily than Fury Road on visual effects, and that Miller completely embraced the idea that CG is the way to go to build worlds and do whatever we need to do in post. In addition to traditional CGI work, such as augmenting backdrops and stitching together the work of multiple stuntmen who shot their scenes separately for safety reasons, Jackson used VFX to heighten certain action scenes, such as the Stowaway action sequence, where VFX animated the Octobos's demise, and the final chase sequence, where a CGI version of Furiosa's otherwise practical car was used to animate things just far too dangerous to be doing with a real car, like side-swiping motorbikes. VFX helped generate a feeling of movement by making background elements move faster and animating flying equipment like the Octobos's rippling black parachute. As Furiosa ages from a child to a young woman over the course of the film, Miller and Jackson hired Rising Sun Pictures to use machine learning, a non-generative form of artificial intelligence, to blend Taylor-Joy's and Brown's faces together. Taylor-Joy said that Miller wanted the transition to be seamless. She spent 2 days shooting with Rising Sun so that they could map her facial expressions. By her estimate, at the start of the film, about 35% of Brown's face was modified to look like her own, a figure that increased to 80% during Brown's final scenes in the Citadel. Additionally, in Taylor-Joy's early scenes in the Citadel, her eyes were partially modified to look more like Brown's. Taylor-Joy stressed that the Actors Union went on strike in part to demand better regulation of AI tools and that Miller's use of AI was consensual. Metaphysic.ai performed a similar function for the Bullet Farmer, blending Lee Perry's facial features with those of the late Richard Carter, who portrayed the Bullet Farmer in Fury Road. Impact on the Australian film industry. According to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation ABC, Furiosa was the most expensive film in Australian history, with a budget of $333.2 million. Over 3,000 people worked on the film, including some ex-convicts who were hired as supporting artists. In addition, to take advantage of Australian tax credits for VFX work, DNEG opened a Sydney branch to spearhead special effects work on Furiosa. It estimated that the office, once fully staffed, would employ up to 500 VFX artists. The film was awarded extensive government subsidies, including a filming incentive from the New South Wales government and various offsets from the federal government. Miller said that government support made shooting in Australia possible. Queensland University of Technology professor Amanda Lotz estimated that Screen NS Blotz contributed $50 million in direct subsidies to Furiosa's budget. Additionally, the federal government offers all qualifying films a tax rebate equivalent to 40% of the amount of money the production spends in Australia. Lotz estimated this federal rebate at $833 million, 40% of $333.2 million, and NSWAS Premier Gladys Berejiklian said that she hoped Furiosa would contribute $350 million to the Australian economy. Although a May 2024 ABC report estimated the size of the NSWAT's filming incentive as $175 million, over half the film's reported budget, the ABC subsequently amended its report to remove that estimate. Other reports suggested that the $175 million figure applies to the total size of the NSW subsidy fund, spread out over 5 years, and not to Furiosa specifically. Furiosa's VFX artists allowed production to keep shooting in Australia, even though the weather in New South Wales was not ideal for a desert-based film. By contrast, Miller had to move the Fury Road shoot from Australia to Namibia because rain caused wildflowers to grow in the Australian desert, which would not have happened in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. According to Framestore, during the opening chase sequence where Mary tracks Furiosa's kidnappers through a series of sand dunes, we ended up pretty much having to replace all of the ground. Colorist Eric Whipp, who also worked on Fury Road, said that because the desert scenes needed to look like Namibia and there was a huge mix of sunny and cloudy days during the shoot, a lot of the backgrounds in this film are full CG. Music. Main article Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Fury Road composer Tom Holkenborg, also known as Junkie XL, returned to score Furiosa as his third collaboration with Miller after Fury Road and 3,000 Years of Longing. Holkenborg moved to Sydney to pen the score and also helped prepare the final mix. He explained that because Furiosa was a character-driven film, the film's score had to be character-driven as well. Musically, everything was being told from a first-person perspective, which is being her Furiosa, how she watches the world around her, the wasteland, its cruelties. Holkenborg added that Miller wanted a way more subtle score for Furiosa than Fury Road, 108, the latter of which was just massive action over 48 hours and an over-the-top rock opera. In particular, Miller vetoed reusing the song Brothers in Arms from Fury Road, which plays when Max and Furiosa help each other escape the Rock Rider Canyon. During the Bullet Farm action sequence, because he wanted to focus the audience's attention on the fact that Furiosa was willing to sacrifice her best chance at finding the green place to save Jack's life, and directed Holkenborg to use Fury Road's musical motifs for the green place instead. Miller explained that the Bullet Farm sequence needed to be kind of a love story in the middle of an action scene. He wanted to show that, through their actions, actually are prepared to give of themselves entirely to the other. Furthermore, Holkenborg used AI to make deep fake voices from another voice, explaining, what if the source sound was a drum rhythm, and what if the destination sound was an electric guitar, but the software doesn't know what to make of it, so it gave us a happy accident that we used throughout the score. Warner Bros. In-house record label Water Tower Music released the official soundtrack album on the 17th of May 2024. Marketing. On the 29th of November 2023, the Warner Bros. Booth at CCXP featured a first-look image of Taylor-Joy's Furiosa. The following day, the teaser trailer of the film was released. On the 19th of March 2024, the official trailer debuted. At CinemaCon, Warner Bros. Screened extended footage of the film on the 9th of April. Miller, Taylor-Joy, and Hemsworth appeared together for the first time in public to promote the film. Running about 5 minutes, the extended preview shown at CinemaCon revealed that the film would be split into 3 distinct chapters. Her Odyssey Begins, A Warrior Awakens, and A Ride into Vengeance. The final film actually features a total of 5 chapters: The Pole of Inaccessibility, Lessons from the Wasteland, The Stowaway, Homeward, and Beyond Vengeance. A trio of first-look images from the film were released exclusively by Total Film on the 19th of April. On the 16th of May, an extended sneak peek was released by Odeon Cinemas and was released on YouTube the following day. Release theatrical. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, had its world premiere at the 77th Cannes Film Festival, screening out of competition on the 15th of May 2024. The film was released theatrically in Australia and India on the 23rd of May 2024 and in the United States on the 24th of May 2024. It was originally scheduled to be released on the 23rd of June 2023 but was delayed to May 2024. The film opened in China on 7th of June 2024, becoming the first Mad Max film to be theatrically released there. Home media. In May 2024, on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Miller confirmed that the film would be receiving a black and white treatment similar to what he did for Fury Road, referred to as the Black and Chrome edition in 2016, expressing his interest in black and white as a format for film. The film was released on VOD and digital platforms on the 24th of June, 129. Following its digital release, it was reported that Furiosa led the home viewing charts. The film came in at number 1 on the iTunes VOD chart for 1st of July and held the same position on the Fandango at home chart for the week of the 24th to 30th of June. It was released on the 4K UHD, Blu-ray, and DVD on the 13th of August. Special features include the hour-long behind-the-scenes documentary Highway to Valhalla in Pursuit of Furiosa, which interweaves concept art, set footage, and interviews with cast and crew, providing an overview of the project from conception to post-production, while shorter featurettes delve into Furiosa and Dementis and Taylor-Joy's and Hemsworth's performances. An extended breakdown of the stowaway action sequence is also included. The disc is rounded out by a featurette on the film's vehicular designs and their construction, 136. The same day, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga Black and Chrome edition, was released simultaneously on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray and digital streaming, and is also featured in the Mad Max 5 Film 4K Collector's Edition, which was released on the 24th of September. The film became available for streaming on Max on the 16th of August. On the 30th of December, alongside Fury Road, the film became available to stream on Netflix. Reception. Box office. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, grossed $67.6 million in the United States and Canada and $105.3 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $172.8 million. The film's box office performance has been deemed a failure. Critics and film pundits noted that the franchise's limited appeal in general, and prequels in particular, contributed to poor box office performance. Variety reported that industry insiders estimated that Furiosa needed to gross $375 million to turn a profit, and that it would end up losing $75 to $95 million for the studio and its co-funders. However, a Warner Bros. Spokesperson claimed that the film had a lower break-even point. As much as half of the film's budget was covered by the NSPOS and Australian federal governments. In April 2025, Deadline Hollywood calculated the film lost the studio $119.6 million when factoring together all expenses and revenues. Performance. In the United States, Furiosa's $32.3 million gross in its 4-day opening weekend was described as disappointing. Industry analysts had projected $40 million. Of that $32.3 million, the film earned $10.4 million on its first Friday, including an estimated $3.5 million from Thursday night previews, the latter of which was similar to the $3.7 million made by Fury Road. Although Furiosa was the highest-grossing film during the Memorial Day weekend, beating the Garfield movie in sight that weekend had the lowest total box office receipts since 1995, and Furiosa was the lowest-grossing film to finish in first over Memorial Day since Casper, $22 million before inflation adjustment, also released in 1995. Furiosa's $10.8 million second weekend, a 59% drop from the opening weekend, excluding Memorial Day itself, was also considered a disappointment, as the Garfield movie dropped only 42% and won the weekend. For comparison, Fury Road had a 46% drop in its second weekend. As a whole, ticket sales for that weekend were down 65% from 2023. Domestic receipts fell an additional 61% in the third weekend. When Furiosa was pre-scheduled to surrender its premium large-format screens, which are typically booked months in advance, to the premiere weekend of Bad Boys: Ride or Die, Furiosa's domestic box office relied heavily on PLF screens. Internationally, Furiosa grossed $33.3 million in the first 3 days. Industry analysts had projected $40 to $45 million. A week prior, the film had opened at number 1 in Australia, earning $3.33 million, 164. During its second weekend, Furiosa performed relatively better in international markets, grossing $21 million, which Deadline Hollywood called a good 38% drop, but coming off a low base. The film premiered in Japan on the 31st of May 2024, 1 week behind the United States, and became the first non-Japanese film of 2024 to debut at number 1. Reported by Variety, it also held the number 1 spot in China on its first day, 7th of June, over the country's Dragon Boat Festival holiday weekend, but its $3.58 million take in its first 3-day weekend left it outside the top 5. However, The Hollywood Reporter reported that the film opened in 6th place with $3.7 million as a batch of local releases dominated ticket sales. Chinese ticketing app Maoyan forecasted Furiosa to finish its run with about $7.5 million. Analysis. Industry analysts identified a variety of reasons for Furiosa's opening weekend, which was considered weak in light of what film consultant David A. Gross called outstanding reviews and a good audience score. The opening weekend was not entirely unexpected. In April 2024, Deadline Hollywood reported that some sources were expecting Furiosa to compete neck and neck with the Garfield movie. However, following Furiosa's disappointing second weekend, an anonymous studio executive told a reporter that it's mind-numbing that Furiosa hasn't grossed $50 million domestically. Gross and The Hollywood Reporter's Pamela McClintock wrote that Furiosa was hurt by the industry-wide disruption to the film production schedule caused by the 2023 Hollywood labor disputes, a position that, according to the New York Times, the film studios had been pushing for several months. According to Gross, moviegoing thrives on momentum and rhythm, one strong movie after another bringing fans to the multiplex once or more per month. Right now, the schedule is thin. Despite being a female-fronted action film, Furiosa's opening weekend viewership skewed heavily male, 72%, and young. 55% of viewers were between ages 18 to 34. The Rap's Jeremy Fuster speculated that one of the reasons for the awful underperformance was because the film is not a 4-quadrant tentpole, writing, Furiosa wasn't ever expected to be a Fast and Furious or Disney remake-level moneymaker for theaters, skewing more towards male audiences and to longtime Mad Max fans. Forbes' Paul Tassi praised Hemsworth and Taylor-Joy's performances, but questioned whether Furiosa commanded the same kind of brand recognition as a traditional IP-led tentpole feature, given that it was a prequel spin-off of a side character in Fury Road who is not even being played by the same actress this time. After Bad Boys Ride or Die debuted above expectations, box office analyst Scott Mendelson tweeted that sequels soar, prequels stumble, and originals struggle, just like nearly every other summer. Furiosa's domestic grosses disproportionately came from premium large format screenings, PLFs, like IMAX and Dolby Cinema, which command higher ticket prices than screenings in regular theaters, and according to Warner Bros. Executives, may appeal more to die-hard fans. In its opening weekend, 54% of Furiosa's domestic gross came from PLFs, compared to 48% for Oppenheimer, 44% for Dune Part 2, 42% for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and 37% for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Conversely, Screen Rant's Kate Bove suggested that Hollywood studios' eagerness to push content onto their own streaming services had encouraged everyday filmgoers to put off watching Furiosa in theaters on the assumption that Warner Bros. Would quickly transition Furiosa to Max. She added that high budgets for tentpole features were raising the bar for box office success. Several critics and filmmakers urged audiences to watch the film without being put off by its weak box office results. Vulture's Bill Jabiri, who praised Miller for taking a big franchise sequel and turning it into something strange, sublime, and potentially off-putting, urged analysts to focus on long-term performance and to give Furiosa time to grab a foothold in the marketplace, rather than write off the film based on its opening weekend. Abiri also pointed to the 2023 cultural phenomenon of Barbenheimer, Barbie and Oppenheimer, which accumulated 75% of its total grosses after the opening weekend due to strong word of mouth. Director Wes Ball, whose film Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes had moved up its release date to avoid directly competing with Furiosa, encouraged people to go and watch the film on the big screen on Twitter by tweeting, "Like the movie or not, creative swings like this don't come around often. When they do, try to enjoy the ambition of it all in a great theater." Furiosa was made because Fury Road was beloved, not because it was a box office hit. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 90% of 419 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 7.9/10. The website's consensus reads, retroactively enriching Fury Road with greater emotional heft, if not quite matching it in propulsive throttle, Furiosa is another glorious swerve in mastermind George Miller's breathless race towards cinematic Valhalla. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 79 out of 100 based on 64 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews, 183. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale, the same as Fury Road, while those polled by PostTrack gave the film an average of 4.5 stars out of 5, with 70% saying they would definitely recommend it. Writing for RogerEbert.com, Robert Daniels awarded the film 4 out of 4 stars and called it one of the best prequels ever made. He praised the action sequences, performances, and storyline. Pete Hammond of Deadline Hollywood viewed the film as possessing the best screenplay of any Mad Max film in Felling. The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw called Taylor-Joy an overwhelmingly convincing action heroine. Writing for Empire, John Nugent awarded the film 5 out of 5 stars and described Taylor-Joy as phenomenal, finding the right balance of steeliness and fractured humanity that Theron instilled. 188. Jada Yuen from the Washington Post thought that Hemsworth had created one of the all-time great screen villains, and Jake Wilson of the Sydney Morning Herald saw him stealing the show. In a critical review, Owen Gleiberman of Variety perceived Furiosa as franchise overkill and as filled with pretension. Nicholas Barber of BBC also disliked some aspects of the film, giving it 3 out of 5 stars. He viewed the plot as meandering and as draining, writing, "You soon reach the point where you're sick of sand, sick of explosions, sick of off-puttingly sadistic violence." Stephanie Zacharek's review in Time similarly criticized the film as a slog that's working hard to persuade us we're having a good time. 193. John MacDonald of the Australian Financial Review opined that part of the film's failure may be attributed to the writing, but also to Hemsworth's woodenness as an actor. In July 2024, Theron confirmed she had seen the film, stating, "It's amazing. It's a beautiful film." When asked if she had talked to Taylor-Joy at all throughout the process or since its release, Theron said, "No, we've really been trying to connect. It's been one of those, we can actually make a comedy out of it. We keep running into each other, and in places when we don't have time to really talk to each other, so we're constantly like, oh my God, okay, let's get together. And then life takes over, but it will happen when it's right." By year's end, RogerEbert.com critic Matt Zoller Seitz, along with Cortland Kelly, named Furiosa as the best of the top 10 films of 2024. 196. Having called it a triumph from George Miller, despite its imperfections, and a film in the tradition of other late-career masterpieces by great directors, clearly less interested in recycling the same established templates yet again, and revisiting familiar themes and situations that were once presented more straightforwardly, with a more ambivalent or complicated attitude. Lucas Kloberdan's Dig, writer for Collider, ranked it as the best action film of the year, writing, "Furiosa produces another classic tale of vengeance. This movie is a worthy entry in the Mad Max franchise and continues to revolutionize action movies with impressive practical stunts. The oil tanker scene alone is one of the best sequences in an action movie, but the non-stop narrative has exhilarating and heart-pumping moments that establish Furiosa as one of the greatest action movies ever, let alone the best of 2024. Many filmmakers, including Maggie Betts, Davey Chu, Robert Eggers, Jeff Fowler, Drew Goddard, Luca Guadagnino, Don Hertzfeldt, David Lowery, Pascal Plante, Celine Song, Nacho Vigalondo, and Adam Wingard cited the film as among their favorites of 2024. Future. In the days after the film's disappointing opening weekend, pundits suggested that it had lowered the chances that Warner Bros. Would greenlight Mad Max: The Wasteland, a second Fury Road prequel focusing on Max Rokitansky that Miller had teased for years. At that time, May 2024, The Hollywood Reporter reported that The Wasteland was not yet in development. Miller had previously clarified that the Wasteland's source material, lore and other background material written in preparation for Fury Road, had not yet been adapted into a screenplay. He also said that he was waiting to see the reception on Furiosa before taking more concrete steps to develop the Wasteland into a feature film. Several weeks after the release of Furiosa, Hardy, who was promoting the bike riders at the time, said, "I don't think it's happening," in an interview, either talking about his involvement in the film or the film itself. In October 2024, while promoting Venom: The Last Dance, Hardy was further asked about whether he'll reprise his role for an additional Mad Max film, responding, "No, I haven't been told anything about it yet, but obviously I'd love to do that. George already has a script called The Wasteland, which is quite specific, so I'm aware of that. It depends on whether they're making it." In February 2025, Miller stated in an interview with Vulture that he was still interested in making The Wasteland despite Furiosa's underperformance at the box office, and would do so if given permission by Warner Bros. But he admitted that he wanted to focus on other projects first. The question is, do you have what it takes to make it epic? Says an undaunted Chris Hemsworth. It's a call to action that comes toward the end of Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. George Miller's apocalyptic epic Western prequel to Mad Max Fury Road that could, of course, be directed at Miller himself. Because this film is here to give you more. More gravity-defying chases, more high-flying stunts, more deeply felt pathos, and, somehow, an even greater spirit to push the limits of what the frame can hold, employing Christian iconography and Arthurian legend to craft an entrancing story that still manages to surprise, even if we already know of the bleak future it's guiding us toward. It's simply one of the best prequels ever made. Broken into 5 chapters, each denser than the last, the film begins with a very young Furiosa, Alila Brown, picking fruit from a tree near her bucolic homeland, the Green Place. A biker gang arrives to forage the land, and though Furiosa ably attempts to sabotage their bikes, she is captured, causing her mother, Charlie Fraser, to venture out into the desert wasteland to retrieve her. A crazed chase ensues, one of the film's many expansive set pieces, that sees Furiosa's mother pursuing her daughter's kidnappers over sand dunes and through a sandstorm to the steps of a hideout belonging to the messianic figure Dementis, Chris Hemsworth. This is the beginning of a decade-long feud between Furiosa and Dementis that involves revenge, grief, and the desire to return home. To do any further summarizing would, of course, not only spoil the film, but would also say that the narrative beats are necessary. They're not. That doesn't mean Furiosa is illogical. Rather that, more than anything, Miller is telling an emotional story of how a once virtuous child became a hardened woman. That kind of arc matches well with the film's operatic sensibilities as we're introduced to the origins of wasteland fortresses like Gastown and Bullet Farm, and taken to the Citadel helmed by a younger, more imposing Immortan Joe, Lockie Holm. Other characters like Immortan Joe's bumbling sons Rictus, Nathan Jones, and Scrotus, Josh Hellman return, and tips of the hat are given to fan favorites from Fury Road. Surprisingly, the older Furiosa, a striking Anya Taylor-Joy, doesn't appear until an hour or so in the film. That might inspire immediate disappointment in some, but it shouldn't. Because Alila Brown as the adolescent Furiosa is so absorbing, often recalling a young Jodie Foster in her mixture of otherworldly intelligence and relentless confidence. The groundwork she lays is so seamless that by the time we leap forward to Taylor-Joy's take on the character, it required a few beats before I could tell the difference between the two actresses. Miller is so assured at reading an audience, he even crafts an elongated chase that sees Furiosa driving across the wasteland with Praetorian Jack, Tom Burke, on an oil run that gives Taylor-Joy and the character the perfect entrance, a hard push in for a worthy close-up. Though Burke is on screen for a relatively short time, he and Taylor-Joy build quick chemistry as two lost souls who believe that paradise still exists somewhere in the world if they follow the map of stars tattooed on Furiosa's forearm. If it feels like Hemsworth isn't also-ran, he isn't, which is odd to say because he is saddled with a terrible wig and an obtrusive prosthetic nose, and even disappears for long stretches. Still, whenever he does show up, he might be the best part of Furiosa. He doesn't just get the best, more instantly quotable lines. He has never been more physically commanding, first as a poised messiah and swindler, then as a blowhard politician, then as an emperor with no clothes on. The combination of Dementis' wit, callousness, and cold calculations is a persona Hemsworth has worked on for some time, and it all comes together here for an unforgettable villain turn. I can certainly nitpick about what elements I prefer in Fury Road, as opposed to Furiosa. There's far more VFX in the latter, causing me to miss some of the thrills Miller inspired with his unflinching use of practical effect. I also think that Fury Road acts on a subtler thematic level, which is saying something, because the visual language in that film, for as immaculate as the craftsmanship is, basically bashes you over the head. Furiosa goes one step further. Every line of dialogue flags the metaphorical importance of every scene. And yet, it's easy to ignore these tiny grievances, not only because you're left marveling at the big swing Miller is taking, but also because his interest in this world, these characters, and this type of big, bold storytelling is so infectious. There's also a character named Pissboy, so this really is a movie with something for everyone. No one knows how to do scale better than Miller. Margaret Sixel and Elliot Knappman's editing is breathtakingly seamless, quickly building both rapport between characters and gnarly deaths with equal tenacity, to the point that D.P. Simon Duggan's eloquent photography of these desolate death valleys, matched by composer Tom Holkenborg's deafeningly propulsive score, wholly immerses you in a way that isn't needlessly showing. Each large set piece feels necessary, aware of space and story, and brimming with a camera that takes delight in knowing exactly what kill shot or angle of the many battles we want to take as it swoops between lunging bodies, massive infernos, monster trucks, big rigs, and over sand dunes. Much will be written about Furiosa on a thematic level, such as how it subverts the biblical apple scene for a well-earned ending, or how it speaks of our present environmental, militaristic, and regressive political reality, particularly why we go to war and the fecklessness of the leaders who take us there. But this is also just a big, entertaining popcorn movie, told with a sense of adventure and play. Miller isn't here for tawdry melodrama, algorithmic plotting, or art designed for the small screen. Furiosa aims to blow you away, and it does, to Valhalla and beyond. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga review. The question is, do you have it in you to make it epic? Garrulous and utterly deranged despot Dr. Dementis, Chris Hemsworth, is making small talk with Furiosa, Anya Taylor-Joy, who is in no mood for idle chatter. The moment comes towards the end of the movie. By this point in the film, Furiosa is a single-minded, flint-eyed Avenger with a customized power tool for an arm. It's a great line, which Hemsworth delivers with a lip-smacking relish. But given the barnstorming action onslaught that has preceded the exchange, it's a question that is probably redundant. This is a George Miller picture, after all. Epic is all part of a day's work. But even by the standards of the previous films in the Mad Max series, Fury Road is the closest in tone, but there are marked differences between the two pictures. This is a huge, marauding monster of a movie. See it on the biggest screen if you can. Let the thunderous rumble of customized war rigs shake your seats, and the sandblasted, angry ochre color palette grind itself into your pores. As the title suggests, we follow the backstory of Furiosa, the character played in Fury Road by Charlize Theron. Here she's performed as a child by Lila Brown and as a young woman by Taylor-Joy. On the physical resemblance alone, it's superb casting. The two look almost uncannily similar. Beyond that, they are both independently impressive in the role. Brown lets us see the wily calculation beneath the shell of trauma in the little girl ripped from her mother and her community and forced to see things no child should witness. And Taylor-Joy is a pleasure to watch in the action sequences, which take up probably 90% of the film. Her lithe agility and cunning is a refreshing counterpoint to all the lumbering muscle and firepower. She's tiny in comparison with most of the cast, but give her a grappling hook and a set of wheels, and you genuinely believe she could best any of them. Plaudits to the casting department are due elsewhere too, in particular to whoever decided to unleash Hemsworth on the role of Dementis. It turns out he was born to play a bad guy. Equipped with a fake nose and a dirt-crusted teddy bear, he reprises a touch of the muscle-bound doofus persona he brought to Thor, but couples it with a dangerous blend of sentimentality and cruelty, with a side order of boiling ambition and insanity. His petulantly muttered, "I'm bored," having just watched a key character get dragged to their death behind a motorcycle across cheese grater desert gravel, borders on genius. Dementis is the preening leader of a biker gang who consider themselves a force to be reckoned with in the wasteland. It's Dementis' boys who abduct the young Furiosa. It's on Dementis' orders that her mother is tortured and murdered. And it's Dementis who poses a real and grave threat to the way of life and the place of abundance that Furiosa's people guard from the savage anarchy of the outside world. Furiosa loathes him with a passion that hardens with every passing year. If Fury Road was a chase movie powered by hope for a better future, Furiosa is a revenge flick driven by hate. Her rage might be one of the forces that shapes the young Furiosa, but another is kindness. A curious, anomalous concept that seems out of place in this world in which most people would flamethrower your face off as soon as look at you. The kindness comes from renowned rig driver Praetorian Jack, Tom Burke, who forms an alliance with Furiosa and mentors her as a driver, fighter, and general badass. Of course, evil tends to be more extravagantly memorable, and decency has a way of getting shunted into the background when pretty much everyone else in the cast is trying to out-crazy each other. Still, Burke delivers solid work in a role that can't help but feel a little underpowered. It's a remarkable achievement by Miller, a piece of world-building that is fully realized down to the last diseased pustule on the last burrow-dwelling maggot farmer. And the action sequences are phenomenal. There is a niggling question of whether there is much substance beneath the blitzkrieg assault of the spectacle. Your level of enjoyment will depend on whether or not you need a message with your mayhem. For my part, the mayhem suits me just fine. Fury Road resembled a chase movie, but what's interesting is that the primary subject of Furiosa's vengeance is not Immortan Joe or anyone present in the previous film, but rather the not entirely new character of Warrior Dementis, though briefly mentioned in the 2015 video game as part of Immortan. Joe's origin story. Dementis has never appeared in a Mad Max story before Furiosa. This gives the prequel a unique arc, but it may alienate those who wish for a more cohesive through line. Every villain is the hero of their own story, and no one believes that more wholeheartedly than Dementis, as a rival of Immortan Joe's, Dementis claims to offer his people a way out of the thirst and poverty that the Citadel's rule has forced them into, while many of his followers may trust that he plans to lead them to a world of plenty, his cruel and callous treatment of Furiosa and her mother make it clear that he's not that different from his mortal enemy. Hemsworth's portrayal pairs nicely with Taylor-Joy's fierce stoicism, and the tension between their characters comes to a satisfying boil by their final confrontation despite Dementis' violent and often hypocritical nature. Hemsworth imbus his character with a humorous levity that can often seem like an oasis in the desert instead of clashing with the self-serious tone of the movie. Dementis, larger-than-life and boisterous persona, highlights why he would be a source of hope to so many, mimicking the magnetic charm of many real-world cult leaders. Hemsworth's portrayal pairs nicely with Taylor-Joy's fierce stoicism, and the tension between their characters comes to a satisfying boil. By their final confrontation, Furiosa manages to carve its own valuable place in the world of Mad Max, more than justifying its existence as a standalone movie, while still throwing a few surprising bones. Fans of franchise continuity, though some may long for a meatier, more dialogue. Heavy script. Most viewers will appreciate the ouse meal offered by Miller's impressive visual storytelling and Taylor-Joy's powerful screen presence. Other information about this film. The first thing to say about Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is that it's not like any other Mad Max film. The movie, which runs 2 hours and 28 minutes, is teeming, sprawling, phantasmagorical, ambitious. Where Mad Max Fury Road was set over 3 days, Furious takes place over 15 years and tells the origin story of Emperor Furiosa in 5 chapters, which come with titles like The Pole of Inaccessibility. The film has a cast of thousands of depraved hooligan bikers with rusty weapons and rotten teeth. At times, it feels like they're getting ready to gather for Wasteland Woodstock. The second thing to say about Furiosa is that though it contains a handful of awesome action moments, the action doesn't dominate the way it did in previous Mad Max films. The director George Miller seems more invested this time in his world building than he's in his Road Warrior. The most important thing to say about Furiosa, however, is that what it all adds up to is a movie that can be darkly bedazzling, and that will be embraced and defended in a dozen passionate ways. But it's one that to me's very short of being a Mad Max home run. And here's the thing I'd be lying if I denied that a Mad Max home run is what I was craving in Furiosa. George Miller invests himself so heavily in the Mad Max mythology that he competes with it, tops it, and tears it apart at the same time. I'm tempted to resist the movie. Mad Miller, Beyond a Sunderdome. A lot of us have a special feeling about the Mad Max films. We think they're the greatest thing ever in the early 80s, when I became obsessed with them. And when there were just 2 of them, I would go back to see them again and again. Always on the big screen, and I would play a film critic game with myself called Which Mad Max Film is Greater Than the Other Was It? Mad Max 1979, Miller's original camera mounted at bumper level epiphany of a drive-in movie biker film, starring Mel Gibson in black leather as a family man who goes up against the toe cutter who was like a psychotic Hell's Angel, scripted by Shakespeare. Or was it the Road Warrior Miller's 1982 sequel, which transplanted the original films? There is no God. There is only speed, jackknife, kinetic excitement to a future wasteland. Overrun by Baroque psychos, most people would say The Road Warrior is greater, but Mad Max in its cruder, low-budget way had a down and dirty B-movie virtuosity. The Road Warrior was bigger and grander. I decided this was part of the fun of the game, that the greatest Mad Max film was whichever one you Watching a few years later, Miller perhaps high on his own Legend A syndrome that's more or less built into being a visionary filmmaker, made Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome 1985 a threequel that had some splendid things in it, Tina Turner the Thunderdome Showdown, but that also turned into an inflated Yan fairy tale about saving the children, a good idea in life, but not Sufton in movies. It wasn't a terrible film yet. These Aries felt cooked, spent, diminished it. Seemed as if Mad Max and the Road Warrior were too bravura in their drive-by nihilism. To keep extending, Miller had made the 2 greatest action films of all time, and he moved on to other things. But that, of course, wasn't the end of the story. In not a world of recycled IP, Mad Max Fury Road 2015, released 30 years later, did the impossible. It revived the series at full intensity, sweeping memories of Beyond Thunderdome under its spectacular wreckage and creating a heroine. Charlie Theon's hellacious buzz-cut Furiosa, who was every bit as full-throttle commanding as Mel Gibson's Max. True to her name, the film was so fast and furious that your eyeballs had to learn how to watch it to follow the ballistic micro-edits. But when you got onto the wavelength, the black magic of the Mad Max world was back. It was an epic desert drag race miracle, a sequel worthy of the first 2 films, and in that sense maybe the 3rd greatest action film ever made. So what does one do for an encore to that? Furiosa tells the story of how its title character grows up, how she goes from being an innocent village girl, raised in the green place of many mothers, where she's already daring enough to sever the fuel hose on a stranger's motorcycle, to a kidnapped Y, to a resourceful orphan who passes herself off as a boy, to a devious Helen who bounces back and forth between dueling post-apocalyptic underworld empires, that of the warlord Dementis Chris Hemsworth, the long-haired and bearded ruler of the biker horde that first absence with her leading them. Dementis rides in the chopper version of a Banner chariot, and that of a Joe Lackey homie, the ancient Gassam white-maned cult leader of the Citadel. The colony of white-faced fighter disciples who Furiosa was trying to escape from in Fury Road. One of the many things to cherish about Fury Road is that for all its crash and burn splendor and dizzying editing, it channeled the exploitation film DNA of the original. Mad Max films. It was a vision of the future and of the rise of women, but like those first two films, it found its meaning in action. That was its gritty. Glory Furiosa, by contrast, is a pick. Arisk with a stop-and-go rhythm as the young Furiosa goes from the frying pan into the fire, like a heavy metal Candide forming attachments through her survival instincts, but never sticking with anyone for long. She's a lone wolf in a world of scoundrels, theoretically. That's easy to understand, but a movie almost by nature needs to be about the forging of bonds, and Furiosa, as populated as it is with disposable warriors and characters with names like Scrotus and To Jam and the Octobus and the People Eater and Warboy, feels alienated and a touch impersonal. The film seems more invested in Miller's elaborate and at moments overly digitized extensions of the wasteland than in the people who inhabit it. In that way, it's got a touch of Marvelitis. The film seems all but designed to show a Fitzworlds and locations. The Citadel, the Skullface Cliff we'll already know well, and Gastowna. Petrochemical. Jungle surrounded by a giant moat, and the Bullet Farm. There's one spectacular action sequence. It's plunked into the center of the movie, and it involves a gleaming silver 2-section tanker with a jagged whirring reed and doohickey. The entire thing built out of spare parts as it speeds along the desert blacktop with rogue bikers attacking it from all sides. We've been here before, but it's sensationally gratifying to be here again in the unholy thick of speed and murder, with warriors now dying by incineration, yet it's never a good sign. At least in a Mad Max movie, when your most dazzling set piece comes in the middle, Furiosa, like Beyond Thunderdome wants to be something loftier than an action blowout. But the movie is naggingly episodic, and though it's got two indomitable villains, neither one quite becomes the delirious badass you want. When the young Furiosa, played by Ala Brown, is first captured, we think horrible things are going to happen to her. She is zoomed across the nighttime. Desert, where the gnarly biker who nabbed her plans to inform Dementis of the oasis she came from, which in the Garden of Eden opening sequence looks civilized enough to be the Whole Foods of the apocalyptic afterworld. But then Furiosa's mother shows up to rescue her, a ruthless warrior named Mary Jo Bassa. Charlie Fraser, who knows how to repair and ride a thunderbike and is willing to die to protect her cub. Dementis has lost his own family. He still carries his daughter's teddy bear, and that's part of why he forms a sentimental attachment to Furiosa. She will be his family. But I'd be happier with this attempt to humanize a Mad Max villain if the character were allowed to be wilder. Chris Hemsworth still looks like a surfer god hero, and his Dementis never quite lives up to his name. He's not charismatically crazy, just madly imperious. He steals Furio childhood, yet the Beyond Revenge face of at the end still feels like much ado about not enough then too. There's just something a bit off about how the movie comes close to cushioning the evil of Immortan Joe. This is a ruler who presides over a sick sect of suicide killers, and who extends his royal line by maintaining a harem of sex-slave wives. We know all this from Fury Road, of course, but since Orton, Joe's citadel is the place Furious is destined to end up, the film goes a little easy on it. Immortan Joe and Dementis cut a deal over gasoline, and given how dastardly both of them are supposed to be, the battle between them should have been more lavishly twisted. The scenes where Furiosa passes herself off as a boy aren't quite convincing. You have to just go with them. Then she grows up, and Anya Taylor-Joy takes over the role. She's a powerful actor with a sensual scowl, but here with hardly any words to speak. She's at her most stoic. That seems on some level appropriate, especially when she propels herself through an entire road chase underneath a vehicle. But the character is more reactive and less hent than either Gibson's Max or Theon's Furiosa for a while. Taylor-Joy's Furiosa forms a connection with Praetorian Jack Tom Burke, a road warrior whose main lesson to her seems to be to wear blue grease paint on their foreheads. Their partnership comes out of nowhere, then fades into nowhere. More crucial, as much as I love the character of Furiosa in Fury Road, do we really need to see her tangled deep dive that somehow stays on? The surface origin story, it's an impulse at heart that grows out of franchise, culture, And maybe that's why Furiosa, for all the tasty stuff in it, is a half-satisfying movie. Miller creates a volatile world to wander around in, and I suspect a number of viewers and critics will respond fully to that. But part of the genius of the Mad Max films is that when they're pumping on all cylinders, even when they're as grand as the Road Warrior and Fury Road, they are also in spirit as lean and mean as one of those lethal spiked jalopies zooming down the black top in attempting to inflate his universe into something larger. Miller clutters it with pretension and makes it mean less. He takes his eye off the place, Dementis. Chris Hemsworth proclaims, ahead of a brutal punishment. Motorbikes are mounted. They leave dust and blood in their wake. This is The Wasteland, the post-apocalyptic desert setting of George Miller's beloved Mad Max series, but Miller's latest film is The Wasteland. Seen differently, its inner workings, politics, and structures of survival filtered through the perspective of a young Furiosa Theo Asnail, hero introduced in 2015's Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. The titular hero Anya Taylor-Joy is her guide on a journey home, and with Miller's impeccable world-building, sharp directorial eye, and smart casting. This masterpiece of a prequel makes us feel like we're riding right alongside her survival of the fittest. 'Tis the law of the wasteland, though no Mad Max movie has expressed it as poignantly as Furios through the capability and strength. Miller gives the future Emperor. There's no denying she's both mentally and physically equipped for the worst of struggles, both the confidence Taylor-Joy projects and the way Miller chooses to frame his star with a focus on her strong, unflinching gaze give us. The sense that she's accustomed to the harsh ways of the new world, even if she longs for the old one. She was ripped from building on Charlie Theon's quiet, contemplative turn as Furiosa, inner Fury Road. Taylor-Joy burns as bright as the desert sun in a nearly wordless role. She disappears inside Furiosa, and using the character's sheer willpower, she builds a tragically beautiful foundation that's hushed yet powerful. Furiosa's quest to return to the lush oasis of the green place of many mothers is an epic, and it still feels that way, even though we know from Fury Road that she won't reach her destination. Taylor-Joy's fierce cunning and completely gripping performance is up to that task. Hemsworth is also in fine form. One moment he's swaying us with his Maku breed magnetism, the next he's repelling us with Dementis cruelty. The warlord who imprisons Furiosa is proof that Hemsworth should be playing more villain, especially those who allow him to revel in the many faces of evil on the supporting side. Charlie Fraser is in fire as Furiosa's mother Mary, as a taking no prisoners literally and figuratively in her fight to keep her daughter from harm. Fraser has nearly the same round doe-like ease as Taylor-Joy, which not only connects their characters visually, but also bolsters attachment to Mary Tom Burke, playing legendary war. Rig Masturbatory Jack matches Taylor-Joy's sense of silent dedication and crushing loyalty with a performance that feels hardened but not hollow, the product of a life lived in chaos. Miller's knack for world building is on full display and gorgeously photographed by the Great Gatsby cinematographer Simon Dugan. He and the director band together to create vibrant and striking imagery that tells Furiosa's story, as well as the words in Miller and Nick. Laura's script, Dementis, becomes covered in red flare dust early on, seemingly signifying where his arc is headed later. Aug, crafted by a young Furiosa, becomes stuck on a tree branch during a death, defying escape. Miller holds on the hairpiece. As time accelerates around it and the branch grows and blossoms, one lingering shot puts all of the events of Furiosa in perspective alongside Fury Road, tying both films together so seamlessly that the satisfaction of it just melts off the screen. Junkie's rollicking score performs a similar function with its callbacks to the themes of Fury Road. Furiosa elegantly builds tangible links to the other Mad Max films to give us the full scope of the wasteland and its inhabitants, offering satisfying answers to many burning questions along the way. If you're an avid fan, you'll know which to anticipate. That escape scene is one of the many thrilling action sequences that keep this 2.5-hour movie running on all cylinders. The kind of excitement that helps Furiosa dodge we all know where this is headed. Problems of other prequels. The outrageous stunts of Fury Road set a new standard for action filmmaking, as well as sky-high expectations for any subsequent Mad Max movies. And while Furiosa doesn't outdo its predecessors' wall-to-wall car chases, it's not necessarily trying to This isn't a Fast and Furious movie. It's not all about one-upping what came before, until it becomes a cartoon. Instead, its action is just as effective as Fury Road's. When things ramp up, they bury the needle on the speedometer. What do we say about Mad Max Fury Road? One of the 5 chapters of the story is entirely dedicated to a rip-roaring fight on wheels that gives us a front-row view of Furiosa's determination and focus. Taylor-Joy is utterly transfixing in this scene, and even knowing that her character will survive both the fight and the film, there's still a sense of peril as she clings to the undercarriage of a giant war rig. This chapter, and much of the rest of Furiosa, doesn't let you out of the chokehold until the drivers hit the brakes later, when the rivalry between Dementis and his fellow warlord Immortan Joe escalates. Miller finds shocking new ways to depict the conflict when they squabble. It's their many followers who do the fighting, again sidestepping the fact that we know Joe will live to see Fury Road. The practical staging and visual effects of a high-octane ambush in Dementis territory and a raid on Joe's turf work in tandem to creatable, distinctly Mad Max spectacle cars and trucks savagely barrel down the blockades of a fortress structures, crumble underneath running feet, and gunshots whiz by at practically every moment. Miller is still moving as fast as ever, and it's exhilarating to be in his passenger seat, the biggest surprise up the director's sleeve. Despite all its violence, the man quartered by revving motorbikes, the woman tortured. At the stake, the driving force of Furiosa's love the protagonist, yearning for her Motherland, her unexpected connection with Praetorian Jack of Endiment, use impulses to rule Eshtedas all spring from a vast emotional landscape with that Miller expertly shows us that when we fight for love, we must be prepared for the side effects and consequences. For Dementis and Immortan Joe, it's the thirst for power. For Furiosa, it's the shedding of who she knows herself to be toward the end, when we're well acquainted with all that's plagued Furiosa. One character speaks of her with reverence. That is the darkest of angels. The 5th rider of the apocalypse. Thanks to this film, we now know how and why Furiosa was forced to become the show stealer we meet in Fury Road. The miracle here is that Miller and his team have packed in enough eye-popping daring-do, captivating acting, and yes, heart to make the next step in her journey feel almost incidental. It helps that they've done so much to integrate Furiosa into the larger Mad Max saga. But this is a triumph with enough gut and gumption to stand entirely on its own. More details long before we ever stepped foot on the Fury Road with Charlie Theon's Furiosa and Tom Hardy's Max Rockatansky. Director George Miller and co-writer Nick Lathouris first spent years laying out the backstory of the world of Mad Max, including the life and origins of Imperator Furiosa. It was this screenplay of Furiosa's story that Theon would read as a background for her character, and after the success of Mad Max Fury, wrote Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Seemed like the obvious next choice, especially with the screenplay ready to go after COVID delays and scheduling. Hardy's Max had his own silent, brooding charm. Furiosa was the star of Fury Road. Her journey was at the center of the story as she tried to escape S with the 5 wives of Immortan Joe Hugh Keyes Bond to take them to the Green Place. Furiosa's character struck a chord with viewers as much as the non-stop high-octane action did, as is the way with Hollywood. I went into this prequel with some apprehension. After all, this is an industry obsessed with franchises, and Fury Road felt so original back when it first came out in 2050. It was one of my favorite films of that year and remains one of my favorite action films of all time. It was hard to imagine how this film might best that or top what already seemed like perfection. However, it's clear that with Furiosa, Miller is trying to tell a different story than the one you might expect, and depending on your expectations. Furiosa could either be an epic origin story for this beloved character, can be caught in the shadow of its more stylistic predecessor. Let's just get this out of the way first. The comparison will be inevitable. Not only are these 2 films Miller's more recent works, but they are naturally tied together. However, these are 2 very different films. One of the main differences is timing. While Fury Road takes place over a matter of days, if not hours, Furiosa takes place over the span of years, nearly 2 decades. Fury Road plunges us immediately into the deep and engulfing, using the hot flames of Immortan Joe's caravan, whereas Furia starts more conventionally. It starts from the beginning of Furiosa's story when she was a little girl played by and unmatched Lala Brown, and leads up through her kidnapping and her years with the warlord Dementis, a lackluster Chris Hemsworth, and through to her time as an adult, an explosive Anya Taylor-Joy, becoming the Emperor for Immortan Joe, now played by Lackey Homie. Because of the nature of this story, the pacing and tone are completely different from the previous one, the heart-pounding act-cation that was. Fury Road is not fully present here, and in some respects the story is weaker for it. However, there is such a thing as too much information, and unfortunately, Furiosa falls victim to a problem that Fury Road never had there. Are parts of the film that feel like a pure info dump. Like Miller is filling in a picture that's better left bare for anyone who has ever been curious about the world of Mad Max, and more specifically about the war for dominance between the warlords. Prepare to have your curiosity sad. Speaking of these warlords, the newly introduced Dementis pales in comparison to a Joe. While Joe feels like a nightmarish inevitability, with his zealous war boys and obsession with breeding Dementis, feels more like a pesky cockroach who simply won't die. Yes, he's cruel and he is sadistic. But who isn't in this world? Furio's grudge against him is personal. But once that is taken away, Dementis feels flimsy. Joe had a robust supporting cast to instantly fill out his development without Miller needing to do much explaining. But Dementis is often seen monologuing, obsessed with his own voice and power. Considering that both Brown and Taylor-Joy are so compelling on screen, Dementis is unnecessary, and he quickly overstays his welcome. It was jarring to me going into Furiosa and expecting the action I got in Fury Road, only to get a much more unevenly paced film, thematically. Fury Road is a story about redemption and triumph over an oppressive force, while Furiosa is about revenge and a total loss of innocence. The two stories serve different purposes. Typically, we might see the rising action, climax, and falling action throughout the entire length of a film, but Furiosa breaks this up into 5 chapters. The result of separating the story into parts means that the runtime of 14:8 minutes feels more noticeable. The pacing for some chapters is relentless and energizing, while others feel like slow burns. The episodic nature of this format might not appeal to everyone as it robs the film of a more cinematic quality. In the first chapter, a young Furiosa is kidnapped and we are plunged into action. Immediately, her mother, Mary Jo Bassa, Charlie Fraser, acts as a one-woman army, following her daughter's captors from the Green Place all the way back to their camp. This is by far one of the most tensest sequences. We know that Furiosa will eventually end up as San Imperators, others a looming dread that despite all of Mary Jo's determination, ultimately she will fail. It's equally frustrating to watch a young Furiosa make the mistakes that will lead to her capture, knowing that they are reasonable for a child, while also wishing that she'd make the right choice. Instead, each segment of Saga plays with tone, while the opening chapter is about Furiosa's introduction to the wasteland. The subsequent chapters follow her as she learns bitter lessons from the cruel Dementis. Her time with Dementis is marked by anarchy and survival at all costs. Furiosa witnesses Dementis' brutality firsthand and is largely silent, an observer and student to his brand of ruling over his gang. This chaos comes in stark contrast to the order of Immortan Joe's gang. As a girl, it's nauseating to watch Furiosa get lecherously eyed by Russ Nathan Jones, only for her to realize that the only way to survive as a woman with Immortan Joe is to eventually become one of his wives. The film culminates when she meets Praetorian Jack Tom Burke. Her life changes as the story takes a sharp romantic shift as she becomes determined to escape Joe's and run away to the Green Place with Jack. The conflict between the warlords catches up to them, consumed by her need for vengeance. At this point, we finally see the full transformation, taking us from a precocious young girl into the enigmatic woman we first meet. Watching Fury Road. What works with Furiosa is how detailed the telling of her story is. Furiosa is an intrinsically interesting character, and I always felt like I was rushing to get back to her story in this film. The problem is that Furiosa isn't just about Furiosa. The L of the war between warlords fills up a lot of time, and honestly, Dementis, Immortan Joe, and the other characters at gas tune, And the bullet farms simply aren't interesting enough to warrant the time they get on screen. The politics at play drag the story down, and I get the sense that Miller might have had a more spelt story if this extra fat was trimmed away as valuable as the information about the politics of Gastown and the bullet farm is for the actors. The viewer does not need to know so much information. Adding these elements dilutes Furiosa's story of vengeance. The absolute highlight of the film has to be the two actors leading the film. And no, I'm not talking about Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth, though much of the marketing for this film centers around Taylor-Joy's older Furiosa. A large part of the movie sees Alala Brown's young Furiosa as our leading character, so much so that at one point I forgot Taylor-Joy was even in the film. Brown has the potential to go far in this industry, as the young actor easily slips in and out of the different phases of Furiosa's life. The transition from Brown to Taylor-Joy is also incredibly seamless. The two actors are chameleons, and when Taylor-Joy takes the lead, there are moments when she looks and acts so much like Charlize Theron that it feels like there's some movie magic at work to meld the two together. But there is not. That's all talent, and it's impressive to say the least. What is also a surprise is the natural romantic chemistry Taylor-Joy has with Tom Burke as Jack. The effect is instantaneous. The moment they meet, that chemistry crackles off the screen, though the relationship feels a bit forced and needs more development to make it feel less rushed. Burke and Taylor-Joy make up for those shortcomings. The two characters can tell a whole story by simply sitting next to each other on a war rig, and it is reminiscent of Max and Furiosa in Fury Road, where the tension is so palpable there's no need for dialogue. Unfortunately, where the film falters is with its other star, the aforementioned Chris Hemsworth, complete with a giant nose prosthetic that feels both unnecessary and also does little to hide Hemsworth's natural swooning dementus. Is not a role that Hemsworth slips into easily. The character is over the top, braggadocious, and ambitious, but the performance never slips into the truly sinister as it should. It's difficult to see the performance and not see Thor God of thunder and Avenger underneath it all, from the washboard abs to the red cape. The costuming does Hemsworth no favors. He sticks out like a sore thumb, and by the time we pass the midpoint of the film, his character feels extraneous. It's not that Hemsworth isn't leaning into dementus, he is, but this character simply seems to be an ill fit for the actor. Unlike Charlize Theron in Monster, or even Colin Farrell in The Batman, who became essentially unrecognizable for the role. There are times when Dementus just looks like Chris Hemsworth in The Wasteland being, and the film did not do enough to buff away the Marvel shine. I have no doubt that there will be fierce Furiosa defenders at my screening alone. There were people saying Furiosa is better than Fury Road, and to some extent, Miller deserves this praise. Furious deserves this praise for the first time. In this franchise, the story is centered around a female character and feels so wholly fleshed out and explored. It's brilliant, but Furiosa still lacks a spark. It's being weighed down by Miller's world building, doing a disservice to Furiosa's origin. The production design is still as amazing as it was in the first film, but Miller's vision lacks refinement here. Cinematographer Simon Dugan. The Great Gatsby 300: Rise of an Empire does not have the same sweeping visual eye that John Seale had in Fury Road. We lose some of the size and scope of these battles. On war rigs and the roaming caravans of bandits, Fury Road is undoubtedly an action flick first, but Furiosa is much more of a character study. Similarly, while Junkie Exel returns as the composer, there are whole chase sequences and action sequences that are devoid of his heart-pounding compositions that had me wondering, why are we sitting here in silence at the end of the day? Perhaps if Furiosa was released first, plunging us into Furiosa's introduction without knowing where she'd end up, the film would have had a stronger impact. But because it is a prequel, it will struggle under the shadow of a film that is technically and cinematically superior. Held up by Alala Brown and Anya Taylor-Joy as stellar leads, Furiosa can be inspiring at the best of times, an Edmund Dance story about revenge, But at the worst of times, the film feels as bloated and unwieldy as the People Eater dragged. Down by too many ideas, does the good outweigh the bad? Just barely, but not enough to dethrone its predecessor. They say you can't catch lightning in a bottle twice. George Miller calls on that with Furiosa, a Mad Max soda, an audacious, wildly inventive, and deliriously thrilling prequel that complements Mad Max Fury Road, its older sibling. One of the greatest action films ever made, Fury Road remains an overwhelming and widely celebrated legacy sequel, the gold standard for ambitious filmmaking, practical stunts, and pure cinema in the age of watered-down Hollywood franchises. The new film leads into the 2050 masterpiece. And the title is no exaggeration, it's as a gath that unfolds over several years. If Fury Road takes a straight route to freedom only to perform a turn back to salvation, Furiosa has a more patient approach, containing its narrative in several chapters on the familiar Australian terrain, the scorched wasteland festering with leather-clad raiders, zealous warboys, power-mad warlords, and desperate heroes all fed a diet of maggot protein human, lizard, sausage, and a few drops of water. It's a nipple-ripping onslaught of, as one character describes, purposeful savagery. There's no shortage of visceral and formal bravado at work, and yet Miller never loses sight of his character and her journey, deploying thematically rich material and a stunningly realized package. No amount of hyperbole can capture the pure adrenaline rush of Miller's ambitious visual storytelling. It's all the more impressive that Miller made this film in his late 70s. He shows no signs of slowing, whereas some directors' output becomes more patient and reflective in their later years. Years such as Martin scores with his meditative epic, The Irishman 2019, and Killers of the Flower Moon 2023, Miller's capacity for grandiose action set pieces. Downright bizarre details and spectacular showmanship remains unmatched. No wonder he's been thinking about making Furiosa almost since he first conceived of Fury Road in the late 1990s. And enlisted actor Nico, who appeared in the original Mad Max 1979 as a mechanic to help develop his ideas. Loss specializes in dramaturgical analysis, and his efforts to investigate and flesh out characters for the 2015 film resulted in an extensive backstory project that eventually became the script for Furiosa. Miller and Loss, script completed well over a decade ago, would be as thoroughly storyboarded as their work on Fury Road, doubtlessly. That's why the prequel pairs so naturally with its counterpart, despite 9 years having passed between the two. To be sure, Miller has had Furiosa on his mind for a long while, at various points throughout the last quarter century. The director made plans to shoot Furiosa and Fury Road back-to-back. He even began developing Furiosa into an animated companion film, reminiscent of the Animatrix 2003, for the full backstory about the development of both films. Read Kyle Buchanan's excellent book, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, The Wild, True Story of Mad Max Fury Road, but perhaps it's appropriate that he took a break after Fury Road to make another non-Mad Max film. The woefully underrated 3,000 Years of Longing 2022, that film spans millennia and remains a cohesive piece of character work, maintaining its narrative integrity despite the temporal perspectives. Shifting several times, Miller takes a similar approach here, staging his Saga. Over 15 years to explore the character originated by Charlie Theron. And while it's somewhat disappointing that Miller chose not to bring Theon back, if only to avoid the distracting de-aging process, her replacement, Anya Taylor-Joy, embodies the character in all her defiance and rage after the terminal freakout point that ushered the fall of humanity. The young Furiosa a la Brown and her community of fierce women warriors live in an Eden's cradle of life, surrounded by desert and filled with trees, fruit, and clean water, a lavish place of abundance, modeled after an Albert Bierstadt painting, when she's kidnapped by a small posy of raiders who intend to bring her back to their gang as proof of this lush green Arcadia. Her mother, Charlie Fraser, pursues them. It's partly to rescue her daughter, partly to do anything necessary to keep the location of their paradise a secret, despite her Putting up a good fight, Furiosa's mother is overcome by the legion of bikers, loyal to Dementis played by Chris Hemsworth, who excels in playing charismatic psychos, who feign benevolence to see him in 2018's Bad Times at the El Royale here. Hemsworth disappears behind an initially goofy prosthetic nose and bushy beard that serve as an effective mask, making us forget the actor's hero persona from them chew for something more insidious, chaotic, destructive, and ultimately pathetic, while Furiosa continues to unravel over several years Dementis remains a regular fixture driving the story forward in his relentless pursuit to fill his internal emptiness, carrying a small teddy bear which he claims belonged to his long-gone version of Max. Both lost families but responded differently. Max went into raw, animal brain survival mode, while Dementis channels his wounds into increasingly vile terror in an attempt to feel something. And at the same time, he acts like the savior of the wasteland, a liberator of downtrodden people who wraps himself in a parachute cape and puts on a good show with his 3-motorcycle chariot. But he's just another petty egomaniac. Let the Furiosa, in a cage holding her prisoner to show her off as well, nurtured proof of paradise. Our young hero must learn to survive under a despot. She received some sage advice from the history man George, Schaff, a wise old walking encyclopedia who covers his body in tattoos of written information, make yourself invaluable. He tells her, it's an important lesson. After Dementis clashes with the leaders of Gas Town, the Bullet Farm, and the Citadel, the latter of which is run by Fury Road's baddie and Morton Joe Lackey homie, Dementis negotiates a trade after taking over Gas Town, handing over his makeshift daughter Furiosa, whom he calls Little D, in exchange for power and resources. Immortan Joe plans to add Furiosa to his stock of breeder women kept in a vault in his tower, but she soon escapes and disappears among the war boys, and Immortan Joe's mutated children, pretending to be a boy, to become a valued mechanic and fighter, trained by the kindly Praetorian Jack Tom Burke. And given that the prequel operates in origin story mode, Furiosa offers a look at how she helped build Orton Joe's unstoppable war rig, how she lost her arm and replaced it with a robotic appendage, and other elaborations. Most prequels tend to demystify and add nothing of value to what came before. But here Miller defies the usual Hollywood mold by telling a story whose particulars never feel necessary components of an epic chronicle, of course vital to Fury Road's spectacle are its practical car crashes, stunts, and minimal use of CGI. Some remember the 2015 film as devoid of digital trickery, but it had plenty to render a massive sandstorm scenes around the Citadel and elsewhere, the same of Furiosa, which boasts several awe-inspiring pyrotechnical displays, vehicle crashes, and races through the wasteland. A standout sequence involves one of Dementis' generals called the Octopus Goran Clute pursuing Fury YSA, and Jack in various contraptions parasails fan-powered gliders, goons with metal shows who skate on sand, and a massive octopus-shaped kite that's among the most memorable sights in the film. Although Miller uses more CGI here than in Fury Road, it's negligible and hardly spoils the heightened moment-to-moment experience thrust forward by Tom Hulkenberg's propulsive music, along with cinematographer Simon Dujan Miller, fills his expressive canvas with bold colors from orange-burned desert to blue. Hued night scenes, resembling how silent films used to tint the otherwise monochrome celluloid, depending on the scene. And sure enough, Furiosa is a film of few words, most of them spoken by the blustering Dementis, with dramatic fades to black and chapter titles throughout. Miller captures the historic scope of Furiosa's journey. Miller is a master of visual storytelling, adopting a technique that defies the usual approach to Hollywood action movies. Most productions use multiple cameras to capture the action, so the editor has a variety of options depending on how the studio responds and tests screening scores. But Miller's elaborate pre-production storyboarding process conceives of every shot beforehand, informing how the action is staged and captured, so that no shot feels out of place. This allows for elegant imagery such as a storm blowing, a way a motorcycle's trail in the sand, and also a cohesion to the film's elaborate sequences. Even though the runtime of 148 minutes, nearly a half hour longer than Fury Road, might suggest an unnecessarily protracted story, it races by with breakneck momentum in part. Because Miller has spent years obsessing over every frame what's so refreshing about Furiosa, that Miller isn't attempting to replicate the ton of Fury Road's nonstop chase. Instead, he builds a mythology that he has already paid off with what follows. If there's a single misstep, it's there cap scenes from Fury Road cut into the end credits, but that mildly awkward choice hardly impacts the overall cinematic bliss and display event, though the story has several stops and pauses along the way, even a montage of a massive war between the warlord factions Furiosa. Isru Shallow Fatantured by Taylor Joy's primal and KG performance. Admittedly, I had unreasonably high expectations for Furiosa, and Miller met them by delivering a prequel of mad poetry that deepens and enhances an iconic character and the story to follow in Fury Road. Once again, the director achieves an unconventional, masterful piece of visual storytelling with a level of energy and momentum unmatched by any other filmmaker working today. Afterward, I was exhilarated and exhausted in the best ways, but also satisfied, a rare thing given the usually underwhelming track record of most prequels. Miller's film feels at once personal, morbid, and insanely visionary. It's motivated by his gleeful love of vehicular mayhem and a clear affection for his creation, Furiosa, and her solo outing delivers in every way. Fury Road fans could hope for offering another Allor-action extravaganza that adds a worthy standout installment to Miller's post-apocalyptic series. This film, directed by George Miller, written by George Miller and Cloris, based on characters by George Miller, and Byron Kennedy, produced by Doug Mitchell. George Miller, starring Anna Taylor-Joy, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Burke, Alala Brown, cinematography Simon Duggan, directed by Margaret Sixel Elliott Mann, music by Tom Hewlin-Borg, production company Kennedy Miller, Mitchell Village Road. Show pictures distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures. Release dates 15 May 2024 in Cannes, 23 May 2024 in Australia, 24 May 2024 in United States. Running time 148 minutes. Countries Australia, United States, language English. Budget $168 million. So guys, this is the review of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga movie, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe West Films to our channel. Thanks for watching.